at WeThePeopleTermLimits.com. I'm Clive Gray, filling in for our usual, my usual counterpart, Kristen, is Mayor Debbie from Grover Beach. Debbie is not only a previous mayor, but she's a very astute businesswoman, as well as the author of The Happiest Corruption. I recommend it. It's a good read because it really is an indication of what's going on in the federal government, and it's on a micro scale. But anyway, that's why we're here, and to talk about actually a couple of senators. And sorry, go ahead, Debbie.
Hey, thanks a lot, Clive. It's a lot of fun to be live with Clive, and I'm really enjoying learning a little bit more about what you're doing here, because what I really like about this is it's grassroots. You're not out there trying to get politicians to do something for you, trying to get your legislators to write more legislations. You're just out there trying to get people to vote.
Exactly, and this is not a nonprofit. It is actually a hole in my wallet. But the whole point is we're not generating revenues here. What we are trying to do is get everyone's attention to use their vote to change Washington. And our message is do not vote for anybody running their 13th year. That gives you 2 terms in the Senate and 6 in the House. And that's plenty of time to get things done. And if we could do that, and it requires 50% of the voting population to do this, and if we are successful, then we can change Washington out in about 3 election cycles. And you're going to get younger people who are going to be more interested in their constituency. And, you know, when I say younger, I'm talking voting age, because if you think about it, some of our founding fathers were teenagers.
Yeah. And you know what? I loved Google yesterday. I was Googling a little bit, and look what I found. Google says register to vote. And I don't know if folks know it, but you can register to vote before you're 18. If you're going to be 18 at the time of an election, so even if you're 17 now, you can register to vote in this election, and 13 is an unlucky number. You can make a difference now, even if you're 17.
Indeed. So with that, we're going to be discussing 2 senators, Mitch McConnell and Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. Mitch McConnell's from Kentucky, and the point is, this is not a partisan thing. We are going after Republicans and Democrats alike, because in the Hall of Shame, as I call it, all these Congress people are, for the most part, corrupt. There are a few good ones in there, but the majority of them are making money hand over fist, insider trading, and whatever deals they got going. And you and I need to change that. So with that, I want to move along, and we're going to go into our panel discussion where we talk more in depth about these 2 characters. Hello, and as you can see, today we're going to be talking about a gentleman by the name of Mitch McConnell. Now, Mitch McConnell, I did a little research on his wealth, and most of the wealth he has generated was through his wife. But nonetheless, he's been in office 37 years. And so I like to refer to the Congress as the Hall of Shame. And these are people who have been in there way too long, 37 years. You know, he's a controversial person, and I think it's time for new blood. And on that, we have Liberty, the hound of humanity. And I'd like to hear what you are barking about on Mitch McConnell. You're muted.
I would be more than happy to give you my take on Mr. McConnell, but Clive, did you know that dogs do not sweat?
Yes, I did, actually.
Yeah, see, we have to pant to cool down, but when I saw how long Mr. McConnell has been in Congress, the bad feelings seeped in and I started to get all clammy on the inside. So that's how I felt. And now, the other thing I had to say is when I saw his picture, it reminded me of a time my human painted a portrait. It was painted in a nursing home, and it was his great-grandpa. Before that great-grandpa he had painted from the nursing home crossed the Rainbow Bridge. So a portrait of Grandpa's final days. Yeah, can you believe that's what entered my mind when I saw Mr. McConnell's picture? I don't know. He should probably let somebody else lead Congress
I agree.
at this point.
I agree. You know, and people ask me why we have Liberty, the hound of humanity, because as far as I know, dogs don't lie. They love you unconditionally and they're very honest. And so that's why we have Liberty. And with that, I want to move on to Debbie, who is not only a previous mayor, but an author of a book called The Happiest Corruption, which is actually a microcosm of what's going on in the federal government. And with that, give us your thoughts.
Well, you know, we certainly have found locally in my county that when people are in office for too long, they learn too well how to manipulate the power, how to manipulate even the local staff and government processes. And I think that Mitch McConnell is probably a really good example of that. He's been someone who has controlled Congress for a very, very long time, and that's been his mission. And I think it's time to get someone else in there who can exercise leadership rather than control.
I agree, and control is a big part of it. And it's not just Mitch; it's the whole Hall of Shame that is working together to protect them.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me. With that, tell us what your thoughts are, Kristen.
Well, I think that as we've talked before about as these folks continue, not only, has he been in for 37 years, but as he continues to age, I question whether or not he truly has what his voters need as his best interests, or does he indeed have their best interest in mind at this point? So that's my biggest issue. I do have some concerns about his wife, working as a transportation secretary. I think a lot of this becomes really inbred, finding that she kind of used the office to promote her family shipping business. It was said, whether or not that was actually proven, I don't know. But certainly she was accused of doing that. Clearly there's a lot of money that was made, some from her, some from him. I'm just not real warm and fuzzy on him. And I think if he's going to serve office until he's 90, there has to be some kind of question as to what his state of mind might be at that particular point in time when he's about to exit.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And, I'm in that senior population, and many of my friends tell me, I don't feel as sharp as I did in my 20s. I mean, we're not losing it, but, there's a lot of times you walk in the room and you don't know why. And it's sad. So on that point, that's why I want to talk to Joe, because you represent the young people that are coming in and really have a different perspective. So let me know what your perspective is.
Sure thing. So I have two main things about this individual. The first is that his time in office has been since the 1980s, which is now over 40 years ago. That's more than double my own time being alive. And back in the 80s, times were very different. I think that that's undeniable. There were different issues that were being presented. There was the Cold War. We'd just come out of World War II. There was low trust in the government after the Nixon Watergate scandal. There was all sorts of stuff that now Mitch McConnell has come into office with those sorts of issues, and he may not be able to properly sort of switch over to the modern issues of today. And then my second thing is that in my research on Mitch McConnell, I found that he was formerly described in his earlier days in office as a sort of moderate Republican. But as time has gone on, and as he has sort of accumulated power and been in office for more and more years, he's leaned more and more conservatively, more and more towards the right. And the phrase that I think describes the majority of voters is somewhere in the moderate zone. The majority of voters aren't extremely liberal or extremely conservative. They're usually somewhere in the middle. So if we have this individual who's in office for so long that he's swerving away from the desires of his constituents, I think it's time that we find someone who better represents their own needs and interests.
Well said. Well said, indeed. Fred, you said we weren't doing the intermission thing, the intermediate thing on this recording. Is that correct? Okay. As you can see, our next victim, if you will, is Ron Wyden. Now, here's a gentleman who's been in office for, I forget how many, quite a few years, but the thing that gets me too is he and his wife actually in their business capitalized on the PPP program where you get money for your business to help retain your employees. So they took, I believe it was $2.7 million, and then she laid off 180 employees. I mean, seriously, folks, you know, Liberty, help me take a bite out of this one.
Well, as you know, Clive, I agreed to help you out with We the People because I use my retriever skills to retrieve information to help all my fellow humans, but especially information about Congress. So I've never heard of Ron, so I had to look him up. I found this article, and I quote, "Liberals dog Wyden on bill." And I'm like, so now they're using our species to describe political battles? They're using us as a verb? I'm not a verb. I'm a thing. I'm a dog. I'm a person. I'm real. So don't tell me we're going to dog Wyden. But I agree. He's been in there too long, and I cannot see why we can't find somebody more in tune with, again, the constituents, the people that vote, the people that pay all the bills. And stop dogging everybody, Wyden.
Well, Liberty, you're the only one who can make that argument here. So, and with that, let's move on to the human side of this with Debbie.
Well, yeah, we definitely don't want to be profiling people, dogs, excuse me. And I have some trouble with this whole Ron Wyden thing anyway, because Ron is representing Oregon. His wife's business is in New York. So how is he actually, with a wife in New York, representing the people and working in Washington, D.C. most of the time? How's he actually representing the people of Oregon? And I have to give it to him. He did warn in the pandemic that wealthy business owners could abuse the Paycheck Protection Program, as indeed his wife appears to have done. And it's one thing not to have rehired all of the employees that she took money for actually firing or laying off. We'll say she laid them off. But then it's another thing when the government forgives it. And apparently it was all forgiven. So this wealthy multimillionaire got to keep all the money that the government gave her. And a little bit like our last victim, it looks a little bit to me like there's maybe what we could call some insider monkey business going on. Oh, doggy business. No, we don't want to say that either. There's some insider stuff going on there that's not healthy, and I think we should be dogging that a little bit more than we have been.
Thank you. And I think Liberty has something to say about the dog reference, but I don't think he'll monkey around with the other one. Anyway, with that, let's move on to Kristen now. Kristen, it says you're a hockey mom, but you're also a business owner. So
I am. Yeah.
yes.
And I'll tell you, this PPP loan thing really set me off because as somebody with 25 employees, and I also did the PPP loan and spent every single penny to ensure that while my girls weren't working and when they were getting subpar paychecks, we subsidized their paychecks with this PP money. We used it for exactly what it was intended for, and no one lost their jobs. Not one person lost their jobs during the pandemic. That's what that money was for. So when I see somebody who is connected to a politician who then laid people off and her money was forgiven, my blood pressure goes through the roof. Now, my next question would be, did she then have the guts to file for employee retention tax credits as well? I would love to know that, because that would just be salt in the wound, right? And where are these groups that are going out now and supposedly auditing these companies who got the PPP money and didn't use it properly? And why aren't they going after someone like this, who clearly it's noted that she laid off 180 people? Now, there's a percentage that she could have laid off. I get that. There's some criteria, but this should be looked at. And it really infuriates me, because truly small business people like myself who did it the right way, this is just not right.
I have to agree. And as a business owner myself, my early days, I had to take out bank loans to make things happen and work. And, I had to pay them off. I mean, it took me quite a while. And, for them to get off the hook like that is just nuts. But, again, the Congress is not going to investigate itself, as we find. And what they do is to promote themselves and their own interests. It is what it is. So that's where, again, we look to the younger generation like Joe, who really, I mean, I'm really impressed how articulate you are about everything and how well researched you are on these matters. Sometimes more so than I, and I think that's because you're not mentally degrading like I am. You're still on the up growth. So give us your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Clive. So the biggest thing that I found fascinating, I suppose, in a morbid way, I would call it morbid fascination with Ron Wyden, was that he was one of the politicians who warned that that companies and wealthy business owners would be the ones to abuse the PPP. And then the fact that someone as close to him as his wife was the one to go ahead and do it, I think it illustrates the corruption that can come from a long time in politics, not only from the politician themselves, but from people who are close to them, their family, their friends, people who also get the boons. And even if the politician themselves is speaking out against a certain cause, then those people who aren't representing those constituents, or they think that they're not responsible for them, they're able to take advantage of what the politician has for being, a senator or a governor, that sort of the clout or the influence, or just being able to sort of do things underhanded. And I think recently now, as the media has gotten more prominent and things are coming to light a lot quicker with the rise of the internet, people who've been in politics for a long time and the people who are related or connected to them who have seen them be in politics for a long time aren't ready for the fact that these sorts of misuses and abuses of power are going to come to light, whether they want them to or not. So really the main thing is just, not only is this an issue about politicians being in power for too long, but the people close to them feeling those boons and encouraging them to stay in power longer and taking advantage of it. It's not just those people, but everyone around them who really just, they need to be replaced with people who have a new and fresh perspective and hopefully a little bit less of a propensity for corruption.
Indeed. I have to wonder if, after taking that PPE money and then telling us about the corruption, if he actually maybe believes this. See, here's an example. See, this is my wife, and that's how it's done. And I wanted to show you people that, yes, this could be done. So I've done a great job helping the American people. All right. And with that, actually, on Kristen's point there about the investigations of the PPE or PPP, they are doing investigations to my knowledge, but they are not going to investigate themselves. And that's how that boils down. The Congress is always exempt from their own laws. And that's the sad state of things. And that's why we, again, encourage you to use your vote, get these people out, 13 years. Please join us with We the People Speak Live and We the People termlimits.com. Share it, spread it out, and also watch our show. I want to thank Debbie for sitting in for Kristen, and you've done an excellent job. And So any thoughts on what happened today, Debbie?
Well, thank you, Clive. Yes, I had a couple of thoughts. I think one of the easiest things to do on all of that to make a difference and to make sure that we vote in integrity is to start local. Because when you're local, you can go right down to City Hall, to the city council meetings, and you can say your piece. You can talk about what matters to you. It is nonpartisan at the local level almost everywhere. And if we can vote in people with integrity locally, and it's much easier to determine, then often those people will move up the line and go further afield in government. But the other thing is that they do have a connection up the line, even when they're still at the local level, because the folks higher up in Congress will contact them and ask them what we're looking for, what's going on, what are we needing locally, and they'll be able to communicate that. But they need to hear from you in order to do that. And so we want to vote in people with integrity locally, and that's where it starts. That's where we can really make it happen.
Yeah, that's a great point, because Debbie and I are both community activists, but she actually is more of a political front person, if you will. And as in her run for county supervisor, you don't think much of that, but the county supervisor reports to the governor of California. So there is a direct link to that chain of command, if you will. So I agree with you 100%. It's very important that you focus on who your local leaders are and what they are doing and get to know them personally. You have a chance to go to the city council meetings and actually meet these people and talk to them and find out if they're genuine. So on the federal level, a little tougher, but that's how we do it with our vote. And later we'll talk about how you spend your money, because where you spend your money has a lot to do with controlling the government, because a lot of these corporations work hand in hand with these people. And if that's the case, you don't want to be spending your money at that place, no matter how good the deals are. So with that, pardon?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's a lot to be talked about as far as money and politics, and we've covered some of it today, but that's a really big subject. I'm glad to hear that you're going to take that one on too.
We are, but right now we're focusing on the vote. I've learned it's take one thing at a time and wrestle with that.
Well, and I think especially right now, because we've got an election coming up. So now is the time when you can campaign for the people you believe in. You can vote for the people you think are good. And then after that, the really critical thing to do is to show up and to let them know that you're paying attention, on the one hand, to make sure they stay honest, but on the other hand, to make sure they really know what you need and what you want so they can represent you well.
So with that, I want to say thank you, Debbie. You did a great job filling in, and she will be a regular panel member, and we're happy to have you. So again, thank you for joining us with We the People It's.com. Thanks.